Hi, my name is Winslet, and welcome to my Assembly Doctrine tier list. At the beginning of April, I posted my complete Doctrine tier list, which looks like this. And today I'm going to be talking about why I placed each of the Assembly Doctrines where I did. While I expect that future expansions and patches will change how good some of the Doctrines are and add a few others, the Doctrines kept the same values they had at the launch of the game up until the Tyrannosaurus patch, so for about 9 months, and I expect that these numbers will stay the same for quite some time. Even if they do change soon, I think this tier list and all of the little tiny tier lists that go along with it will remain useful, especially to new players who just want to know generally what is a good doctrine and why I feel like it's a good doctrine, and what is a bad doctrine and why I feel like it is a bad doctrine, and what points of the game things start to change around and when certain things can become better. There are 97 doctrines that I could find in the game, and while I'd love to talk about them all in one video, I decided to break them into smaller, more digestible segments like this one. Alright, so we're going to start at the top of this tier list with the Scavenger Doctrine, which is in the S tier because I am a giant fan of clearing out sites. I think it's something that you should do as early as possible and then continue doing so as much as possible as you expand, and even while you're at war. I noticed that the AI actually leaves a lot of them open for you to grab every once in a while as you're moving across the land. And I think if you have um, the background that gives you more from clearing out sites, then you're gonna want to take that every time that you can. And if not, just keep in mind that if you're going over there, that your armies could be doing something else where that probably would make you more resources. But if you take that background or the Scavenger Doctrine, go for those sites, clear them out. You're gonna get a lot of nice resources, which means you'll be able to do more fights without risking losing a unit as early as possible. So before I talk too much about this, I actually do want to look at what it says about it in game, which we can do by doing this and going over to the Imperial Archives and just typing in the name of our doctrine. So, where is he? Scavenger operation. There it is. It took me a second. Because it's not listed as a doctrine, it's listed as an operation. It says right here that the rewards for clearing structures on their world map is increased. I believe that it is 50% increase for scavengers, and also I believe it's 50% for the background that gives you extra, and that I think they stack. I'm not certain on that because I don't really play assembly a whole lot, but I'm pretty sure they stack, meaning yeah, it's if you're playing assembly, you should probably go for clearing out sites. Now let's compare this to what I have on either side of it on the complete tier list. It's up at the top of thing. It's next to technologist, and then the next doctrine would be down in A tier, and that's Divine Legion, which I'm sure you could argue is actually better than Scavenger, but I'm a pretty big fan of it because you can get it early and start getting some really awesome benefits out of it as soon as you have it, really, in the first few turns of the game. So let's go back to our game and search Technologist, because although I'm pretty sure a good number of you know how this works, it is worth going over that Technologist is like the best Empire quest to unlock because of this doctrine. Being able to get 2 more tactical operations points is amazing in the early game, and still very useful in the late game. Making the operations cheaper means you'll be able to cast a lot more operations without running out of energy. I know that sometimes you run out of tactical operations points first, sometimes you run out of energy first. By having this, you'll just make it easier to cast operations in as many fights as you could possibly want. I mean, if you have maxed out your things, you might have to wait a turn to do some fights, but it's worth it because then you'll have some really powerful operations. And yeah, let's go find Divine Legion. Divine Legion is, in my opinion, slightly worse than Scavengers, and that is mostly because of the fact that it's a tier 7 technology. It takes a while to get this, and while the benefits are very, very nice, it only applies to your drained units, which you may have a lot of, you may not. If you go for the strategy where you have a lot of drain, that's pretty good. If you don't, then this is not very useful. Like, it's just okay. Drains are pretty cool, and giving them resurgence means that they probably won't fall in battle that much. Maybe you don't need to use them to mind control some things, or maybe you can use their resurgence to allow them to get the experience they need to do a little bit of mind control. Personally, I haven't focused a lot on drain, so I don't know how good this is. Maybe I should have upgraded it to S tier. I'd love to know your thoughts about that in the comments down below. So I think we are ready to move on to the next assembly doctrine, which is Battlefield Autopsies. It's another very nice doctrine that you can get pretty early on in the game. Before I go back to the game, I should probably show you what I see in the game. So, Battlefield Autopsies. That's not how you want to do it, right? Actually, wait. There we go. That works. So this will give you a little bit more research for every unit that you kill, and you get more research per tier of that unit. If it's a tier 4 unit, if it's like something that's really hard to kill, you'll get 12 research for killing that unit. Tier 3 will give you 9, tier 2 will give you 6, and yeah, tier 1 gives you 1. And I think that this is very nice in the early game because it will allow you to get a lot of the mid-game technologies relatively quickly, but after a certain point you may want to consider dropping it because you know, you need like 3,000 research to unlock some of the late game technologies, so 3 is just, it's barely noticeable. But that doesn't mean that this is a terrible doctrine. The earlier you get it, the better it is for you. And if you got a lot of wandering stacks on the map that just attack your colonies and you just blow them up easily because you've got good militia, that can help you get lots and lots of research. Turn those fights that were not doing anything for your empire into doing something for your empire. And yeah, let's see what we have next to Battlefield Autopsies. I've actually forgotten where on the list it is. It's near the bottom of A tier. It's right after the wildlife one and right before the spacer. Is that the spacer one? I think that's the spacer one. It's like wasteland scavengers. So let's look at wildlife stuff first. Hop on back to the game and compare that like this. So this will give you more morale and HP and the ability to get more experience on your animal and mounted units. If they've got more morale, they'll be more likely to get critical strikes and therefore able to do more damage, potentially. Not guaranteed, but potentially they can get more damage. And if they have more HP, they can take more damage before they die. The real benefit from this doctrine is the XP gain for your animal units. If you've got animals that can evolve, then they'll be able to get there a lot quicker with this doctrine enacted. And then once they're evolved, they'll be just that much better because of the morale and HP bonuses. So yeah, just a little bit ahead of that research doctrine. Of course, once you get into the late game, that research doctrine that we are just talking about, the Battlefield Autopsies, it falls way behind this one, but this is a tier 5 tech, so that kind of makes sense when you think about it. Now, wasteland thingies. How good are you? I think it gives you a small amount of energy after each battle, and this scales with the number of units that are killed, and potentially, I'm pretty sure, it scales with the tier of the unit that you killed. If you want to go check out my beginner's guide to the Spacer faction, I actually talk about it in that one. I think I may have tested it. It's been months since I actually did that video. I think I did test how good it is. And I'm pretty sure it worked the same way Scavengers works, but you get 5 energy instead of 3 research. So not a lot of energy, but it adds up. If you want to spend 100 energy on that, that sounds okay. Could be worth it, but I don't know. Spending energy to get energy seems kind of weird. And yeah, that's why this one's not as good as Scavengers or even Battlefield Autopsies. Now, we can hop on back to our complete thing, and we'll see that Great Harvest is next, which is a pretty cool one. It is tier 9. You won't get it until later on, but when you win a battle, you'll get some food and some production. And that is also multiplied by the tier of the enemy that you're fighting. So it works like Scavengers and Wasteland Scavengers. But is food and production really that useful? It might help you build some units a little quicker. It might help you grow a city a little bit quicker. But for a tier 9 technology, it just doesn't seem like it's going to give you quite as much value in the late game as the other ones that we've talked about. So yeah, it's next to Wasteland Scavenger. We were just talking about that. Energy is better than food and production in the late game and the mid game. Maybe it's arguable that this is better in the mid game, but energy. You want energy. And after that was, which one again? It was, I think it's indentured contracts or servitude. Let's just find the one with the handshake. There we go. That's the one I'm looking for. So this one I said is slightly worse than the Great Harvest. This will make it so that your indentured have a reduced cost in you know how much it takes to build them in the colonies, and then once they're actually built, they have reduced upkeep of 50. That's pretty nice. You can't reduce the upkeep more than 50, so this won't stack. That won't stack with anything, but that's a lot of reduction in upkeep. And I know if you invest heavily in this strategy, it's one of people's favorites, and you could argue it's S tier. But the thing is I don't really go for indentured strategies. I think that there's some better options available to the syndicate. Maybe if you're under a lot of pressure, this is the way to go. But yeah, I think you could argue that the Great Harvest is better than this, especially if you can get to late game. I think, yeah, it is better than this. And now we can hop on back to our tier list here to see what's next. Recycle of Life. Okay, let's pull up Recycle of Life. That one will give your cyborg units 400 morale. All your units as assembly are going to be cyborg, so that's pretty good, and won't necessarily apply to your NPC factions, but it might if you're able to align with the Paragon. Then yeah, it'll give them the extra morale too. And on top of that, you get 25 energy for each friendly cyborg that dies in combat, and that's multiplied by their tier, so that can allow you to replace your ranks if you're actually in a war where you're losing units. I know that once I get to the late game, I tend to have some pretty good units that have a lot of experience and a lot of good mods, and it's hard for me to even lose them. But if you get this early enough, I could see this pushing your armies over the edge in terms of just getting lots of damage from that extra morale, and then, you know, energy if you need it for operations or building units, or maybe modding units. I forget how that works with the assembly, if they have to spend energy. I think if you want to trade them out, it's now free or something like that. Don't know off the top of my head. But let's see, what's next to Recycle of Life on my list? It looks like it's got 2 Empire quests there. I don't know what they are at the top of my head. I think that's Emperor to the right of it. So we're gonna hop on back to the game and find the blue one with the hand up, and I think that's the Emperor in the middle. Yeah, there's Emperor and an Emissary. So we want to look at those 2 ones next. So the Emperor gives us extra popular support, which in turn means that we're going to get more morale, and that will allow us to do more damage. But we'll also get more happiness, which means we'll get more happiness events, and we'll have reduced unit upkeep, which will allow us to build more units. If we have less upkeep, we'll have more energy, and we don't have to worry about stopping building units as early as if we didn't have that upkeep. Popular support is a great way to just boost the size of your armies in the late game, or having popular support is a great way to allow you to support more armies in the late game. But I would say that it's not quite as competitive as the Recycle of Life. That's just a little bit better. They're close. You can make an argument the other way around, but I like this one. That seems pretty powerful. Now let's go to Emissary. I can spell Emissary. Alright, so the Emissary gives you 100% more influence from quests, and if you've been watching all my other tier lists, you probably know by now I love influence. I think the more influence you can get, the better, because that means you can go to the NPC factions more often and get those units more often, or mods if that's what you want to spend your influence on. I know other people like to spend their influence on frontier outposts or covert ops. More influence is better. Doing quests really is not that hard. I know some people hate it, but I'm a big fan of quests. I think that it's a great way to make your units get experience while also getting some nice rewards on the side. And if you keep a unit from dying, it's all the better. So I think potentially you can get more out of Emissary than the was it Recycle of Life, but I could see why some people would argue that Recycle Life is better than Emissary. I'm just a little partial here. Okay, so the next thing on our list is, our last thing on our list is Connected Society. We can go find that now in game. I can't remember what that one does off the top of my mind. Oh, it gives you a little bit of research at the cost of 4 happiness. If you've got 15 pops, you'll get 15 research, and you only have to the only cost of that is the fact that you're going to lose a little bit of happiness. Happiness is a little bit easier to manage in the current version of the game than it previously was, so that 4 happiness is very, very minor. But I think there are some better doctrines that just give you just like 15 food off the bat, or 10 production, and you don't need colonists to do that. If you've only got like 8 colonists, 8 research, or 4 happiness is not a great trade. It's okay, you can manage, but there's definitely better trades that you can make out there. Now before we wrap this up, let's just compare this to the ones that are around this. We have, looks like a Amazon thing and a Devar thing. So planetary cleanup, I'm pretty sure, and cryo something. Let's just bring up the game again and look up cleanup. Nope, is it one word? Yes. This allows you to do more terraforming. I love terraforming. It's a very good way for the Amazon to get as much out of the land around them. If you've got lots of forests, then you'll be able to move quickly through them, get more morale in combat and other things too. So yeah, I think there's just more potential for for gains with this one. I mean, maybe you don't like to terraform. Maybe you don't think that's a good use of your energy. Then I could see the connected society being something that you'd prefer. Now we are ready to look at what's to the right of it. Is that how I spell it? There we go. So this will give you +2 energy for each colonist, but you lose 10 happiness. I think that's a lot of happiness to be losing in the middle of the game. But if you look up there, it's a tier 9 tech, and you know, if you get that relatively late in the game when you've got lots and lots of colonists in each of your settlements, I could see you arguing that this is better than connected society. But yeah, it's not a lot of energy. You got to spend 200 energy to enact this doctrine. So I feel like at that point in the game, you probably would want to use your doctrine slot on something that will get you more benefits in combat, because you're trying to wrap up the game ideally, not get more resources. If you're waiting to get resources then until that late in the game, you may not be in the best position. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say on the doctrines this week, on this week's, or excuse me, today's tier list. If you have any comments, please feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I'll see you around. Have a good one.